Hi, today we're going to talk about Objective 10.3. Describe the structure and function of the mouth, pharynx, and esophagus. So the main digestive function of the mouth is to ingest food, and the mouth is the only organ that can digest food. And here we have a lovely picture of the main parts of the mouth, some things that you probably take for granted, like your lips and cheeks, and things that might be less familiar to you, like your hard and soft palate or the roof of your mouth. If you have some food there, go ahead and take a bite and kind of start chewing it around and just really appreciate what the mouth does for digestion. Like if you didn't have cheeks, the food is literally going to fall out of your face. Or do you notice yourself using your tongue to push food against the roof or the palate of your mouth? The hard palate is like the hard part of your mouth, like where you towards the front of your mouth. And then the soft palate and the uvula back here, that's actually soft and flexible, so it's able to block the nasopharynx. We don't have any food going up through the nose. And then nice view of tonsils from our lymphatic system. Once the mouth starts chewing food, that's called mastication. So mastication is another word for chewing. Starts the mechanical breakdown process. And here's a video I filmed of cats ingesting cheese, if you're interested. The tongue. Remember in 8th period when I showed you guys a picture of the tongue muscle and everybody was really impressed? So if you still have that food, really think about how your tongue is helping you be able to digest your food. You can use your tongue to grip food and to be able to reposition it so that you can chew it easier. And the tongue is important for actually combining the food with saliva. Once the food starts to get broken down and combined with saliva, we call it a bolus. Bolus basically means a wet ball of partially digested food. Lovely, I know. Here's a link to Visible Body. Normally, this software costs $50, but because of the coronavirus, we get it for free. So if you want to log in, go ahead and go to Canvas. There's instructions there. This is a nice view of the tongue, and we can see the muscles, and we can see the top of the larynx right there. And you can kind of turn it around and look at it from different angles. It's not quite the same as dissecting, but it's still a nice view if you're interested. And here is my cat Roz sticking out her tongue for you guys to admire. Next, let's talk about saliva. So we talked about this during the immune system, but saliva helps cleanse the mouth because it contains enzymes that are able to kill pathogens. Also, the only reason we can taste food is because saliva dissolves the chemicals. Remember before Christmas break, we did the senses unit, and I had you guys wipe off your tongue with a paper towel and then put sugar on it? And what should have happened was that if your tongue was actually dry, you could not taste any of the sugar. And then once the saliva starts to come out again, it dissolves the sugar, and then you can finally taste it. Saliva is important for being able to moisten the food. If we didn't have saliva, it wouldn't become a bolus. It'd just stay kind of like dry food. Saliva contains the enzyme salivary amylase, and this starts chemical digestion in the mouth. Salivary amylase breaks down carbohydrates. And there's another link to Visible Body if you want to learn more about the salivary glands and saliva. We're going to talk about 3 main salivary glands. So let's orient ourselves. Here's our tongue. And then the glands, they look like glandular tissue. Kind of looks almost like corn on the cob or something like that. But here's your tongue. And then here's one gland right here. This is the sublingual gland. Lingual means tongue. So it's right there underneath the tongue. And then you can see the little green part where it's able to squirt its saliva out of right there. Next, submandibular. Remember your mandible or your lower jawbone? So that's our lower one right there. Comes out up here. And then the parotid, which means near the ear. So it's that large gland back here that comes out near the top. You have some other glands, but these are the main ones we're going to focus on. And let's review what the mouth is able to do. The mouth does ingestion, it takes food in. The mouth starts propulsion. That means like sending food along the digestive tract. It does that when we start swallowing. The mouth does mechanical breakdown through mastication or chewing, and a little bit of chemical digestion because salivary amylase starts breaking down carbohydrates. But no absorption and no defecation. Next, we're going to talk about the pharynx and the esophagus. The main function of those two is propulsion. They're basically food conduits, so food moves through the system. And to orient ourselves to this picture, here's our tongue. That little space right here is the mouth. So coming back here would be like the oropharynx, and then the laryngopharynx, and then down into the esophagus. So we're going to swallow food, and it travels through the pharynx, down the esophagus, into the stomach. Here's a closer look at the esophagus, and honestly, I just put this in here because I think it's so beautiful, kind of like an abstract flower. And also, this is a good callback to the 4 layers of our alimentary canal. So you can see really clearly here this dark purple band, the mucosa, and then a little bit lighter blue submucosa, muscularis externa, and then finally the adventitia, or what we would also call the serosa. Deglutition means swallowing. So in order for the food to get into the pharynx, first we have to swallow it. And we're going to talk about the 2 phases of deglutition. First is the buccal phase. Buccal means mouth. So if you'll take a minute and just swallow for me and kind of pay attention to what happens, when you decide to swallow, that is voluntary. So everybody swallow. I'm doing it too. You probably can't hear me. And let's think about like what's happening to the bolus. When we swallow, the tongue presses against the hard palate or the roof of the mouth, and that's what forces the bolus into our oropharynx. So everybody swallow. And now are you kind of like actively paying attention to, hey, my tongue is pressing against my hard palate. And then after the bolus enters the pharynx, we have our second phase, also known as the pharyngeal esophageal phase. This section is involuntary, and we have a couple of things happening to prevent the food from getting into our respiratory system. The tongue is going to block the mouth, so food can't go back into the mouth. The soft palate and the uvula block the nasopharynx, and the larynx and the epiglottis blocks the trachea. And then hopefully, if all things go correctly, the food makes its way down the esophagus. Here's a diagram. Feel free to pause the video and study this. And here are some links to 2 videos that I think are really helpful. They're both pretty short. And here's a visible body link that I'll show you right now. So this is the tongue. I know, it's crazy. And then this kind of white thing right there, that's going to be your epiglottis. And this front part is the trachea. So notice the bolus comes down the pharynx, the epiglottis closes, and then it's able to continue down the esophagus. So pharynx, esophagus. Pharynx, esophagus. It's crazy. And what digestive processes occur here? Only propulsion. So not doing anything except moving the food. Please email me your questions. Please post questions on Canvas. Let me know if you want to kind of arrange like a video conference so we can talk about this stuff together. Thanks for listening.